To a lot of us, he's like a little brother. You know what I'm saying? He's not afraid to call and ask for advice. He's somebody that, in the industry-wise, the record industry is a strong family, and he's somebody that, you know, we definitely have our arms around, and we want to protect him because he's such genuinely a nice person besides his talent. You know what I'm saying? He's one of the greatest kids that you could ever know.
Justin, You know, Diddy bought his son a Bentley. Maybe, you know, he could buy you one also while you're out.
He got me a Lamborghini.
Oh, well, that's nice.
I haven't gotten it yet, though.
Yeah, I know. When is that coming, that Lamborghini? We talked about this last time.
He had the Lamborghini for a day or two, and he had access to the house, and he knows better than to be talking about the things that he does with Big Brother Puff on national television.
I am absolutely going to testify. I won't even say his name. He is an evil being, and it's going to pay.
But I was just, living in this shame, living in all this sort of stuff of my past, and I wasn't able to move on. It was hard for me being that young and being in the industry and not knowing where to turn, and everyone, you know, telling me they love me and, you know, just turn their back on you in a second.
What exactly did Justin Bieber say that shattered Diddy's composure in the middle of a tense courtroom? According to witnesses, the moment was so unexpected and powerful that the entire room fell into stunned silence. Bieber, once the golden boy of pop, walked in like a man with a mission, calm, collected, and absolutely focused. No flashy entrance, no entourage, just quiet determination and a suit that signaled he was here for something serious. Most people had no idea he was going to testify. His name hadn't been mentioned in the pre-trial buzz, and that only made the shock hit harder. The courtroom had already been simmering with anticipation, but when the doors opened and Justin Bieber stepped inside, the energy shifted instantly. It wasn't just that he was famous. It was what his presence meant. It meant that someone who had once been close to Diddy, someone the public had seen as his protege, was now willing to speak against him. Bieber took the stand with a steady gaze, showing none of the nervousness many expected. He looked more like a man seeking closure than a celebrity seeking headlines. But the biggest reaction came from one person, Diddy. The music mogul, usually the picture of cool control, visibly tensed up the moment he saw Bieber. His expression changed, eyebrows raised, lips pressed tight, and his lawyers immediately leaned in, whispering furiously. Whatever they were planning, they hadn't planned for this. For years, people had whispered about the strange bond between Bieber and Diddy. The infamous video of Diddy saying he'd spend 48 hours with a teenage Bieber only fueled the speculation. Questions were raised. Why was a global star like Bieber spending so much unsupervised time with one of the industry's most powerful men? What was the nature of their relationship? In the past, Bieber remained silent. But now, during one of the most highly scrutinized trials in entertainment history, he was ready to speak. Not only was this a betrayal of a former mentor, it was a declaration. The courtroom leaned in, the tension thick, as Justin Bieber prepared to unveil a part of his past that had long been buried under layers of fame, silence, and speculation. What exactly did Justin Bieber say that shattered Diddy's composure in the middle of a tense courtroom? According to witnesses, the moment was so unexpected and powerful that the entire room fell into stunned silence. Bieber, once the golden boy of pop, walked in like a man with a mission, calm, collected, and absolutely focused. No flashy entrance, no entourage, just quiet determination and a suit that signaled he was here for something serious. Most people had no idea he was going to testify. His name hadn't been mentioned in the pre-trial buzz, and that only made the shock hit harder. The courtroom had already been simmering with anticipation, but when the doors opened and Justin Bieber stepped inside, the energy shifted instantly. It wasn't just that he was famous. It was what his presence meant. It meant that someone who had once been close to Diddy, someone the public had seen as his protege, was now willing to speak against him. Bieber took the stand with a steady gaze, showing none of the nervousness many expected. He looked more like a man seeking closure than a celebrity seeking headlines. But the biggest reaction came from one person, Diddy. The music mogul, usually the picture of cool control, visibly tensed up the moment he saw Bieber. His expression changed, eyebrows raised, lips pressed tight, and his lawyers immediately leaned in, whispering furiously. Whatever they were planning, they hadn't planned for this. For years, people had whispered about the strange bond between Bieber and Diddy. The infamous video of Diddy saying he'd spend 48 hours with a teenage Bieber only fueled the speculation. Questions were raised. Why was a global star like Bieber spending so much unsupervised time with one of the industry's most powerful men? What was the nature of their relationship? In the past, Bieber remained silent. But now, during one of the most highly scrutinized trials in entertainment history, he was ready to speak. Not only was this a betrayal of a former mentor, it was a declaration. The courtroom leaned in, the tension thick, as Justin Bieber prepared to unveil a part of his past that had long been buried under layers of fame, silence, and speculation. Justin Bieber's first words on the stand were quiet, deliberate, and carried more weight than any outburst could. "I'm here to tell the truth," he said plainly, looking directly at the prosecution. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't emotional, but it was powerful, because in a courtroom packed with lawyers, reporters, and onlookers, one of the most recognizable celebrities on the planet was about to speak about something he had avoided for years. His tone wasn't accusatory. It was steady, almost too steady, like someone who had spent years rehearsing how to say something without losing control. Bieber began by describing his early relationship with Diddy. He talked about being young, impressionable, and excited to be accepted into a world he'd only dreamed of. "I was a kid," he said, "and when you're that age, and someone with power tells you you're special, you believe it." At that moment, the jury leaned in. And Diddy? He sat motionless, but anyone watching could see the tension in his shoulders building. When the prosecution asked Bieber directly about Diddy's private gatherings, the so-called exclusive parties that have haunted tabloid headlines for years, his demeanor shifted. "I've seen things," he said simply, pausing before adding, "things that made me feel like I shouldn't have been there." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The weight of those few words made the entire room go still. Diddy's legal team scrambled to take notes, whispering furiously among themselves. One attorney glanced at the judge as if silently asking for a break that never came. The energy in the room had changed. Bieber wasn't just testifying. He was validating the whispers, the rumors, the unanswered questions. "I remember moments where I looked around and felt out of place," he continued. "There were adults, older people, and no one questioned it. You were just there. That was the rule. You stayed quiet, you didn't ask questions, and you definitely didn't leave early." It was clear Bieber had chosen his words carefully, likely coached, but even the gaps in his testimony spoke volumes. He didn't need to describe everything. His silence between sentences said more than any graphic description could. The courtroom reacted visibly when Bieber began to speak about how these early experiences affected him long after the parties ended. He admitted that he struggled for years, emotionally and mentally, to come to terms with what had happened during those years under Diddy's influence. He didn't frame himself as a victim, but it was clear he carried scars. And then, the moment that cracked Diddy's composure. "I wasn't the only one," Bieber said. "There were others. A lot of us. And we all knew. But we didn't speak up because we couldn't." You could feel the air get sucked out of the room. Jurors exchanged glances. Reporters stopped writing mid-sentence. Even the judge paused, her eyes fixed on Bieber. Diddy's reaction was instant. His jaw clenched, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. For someone who had built a career on control, the loss of it in that moment was unmistakable. Bieber's statement wasn't just a line in a testimony. It was a challenge to an entire system, and it landed like a hammer.
I'm scared that this is going to pull out. I keep running.
I do feel bad, sorry for him. We're all trying to bombard. Oh my god, I thought a vehicle to me.
Up until that moment, the courtroom had seen its fair share of tension, but nothing quite like this. Even the most distracted spectators suddenly sat upright, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. The moment Justin Bieber uttered those final words, we all knew, but we couldn't speak. A chill swept through the room. And Diddy? He buckled. His carefully groomed image, the calm exterior he'd worn like armor, started to fracture. First, a small but visible shake of his head. Then, a clenched jaw. Then came the whispers to his lawyer, sharp and desperate. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something else. A man realizing the story he'd controlled for so long was slipping out of his hands. Bieber's delivery made it worse. He wasn't angry or emotional. He was steady, focused, and that made each word land harder. The weight of his testimony wasn't in dramatics. It was in precision. The defense team scrambled, flipping through files, whispering furiously, trying to regain footing. But Bieber wasn't done. His words weren't just corroborating Cassie Ventura's claims. They were expanding them. They shifted the lens of the case from a personal dispute to something wider. A system of power, silence, and manipulation. By the time Bieber stepped down from the stand, the air in the room had changed. It wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what had been exposed. Whispers spread like wildfire. People exchanged glances. Courtroom reporters furiously typed updates. Even some legal analysts looked visibly stunned. Diddy, for the first time, seemed cornered. The man who once had the entire industry at his fingertips now looked like someone trapped in a story he couldn't rewrite. In the aftermath, social media lit up. Debates broke out. Some commentators insisted Bieber never had a real connection to Diddy, that he was closer to Diddy's sons and their interactions were merely performative. But others questioned that narrative. If Bieber was really just friends with Diddy's kids, one online commentator asked, why is all the footage of him and Diddy? Old videos resurfaced, clips of Diddy publicly referring to Bieber as his protege, of them appearing together at parties and events. To many, it painted a different picture. Not one of a distant mentor, but of a man who had purposefully inserted himself into Bieber's rise. He was showing him the ropes, one podcaster said, but the ropes came with chains. And while Diddy's legal team tried to distance the case from broader accusations, separating physical abuse from deeper claims of coercion and control, the court of public opinion wasn't making such distinctions. To many, it didn't matter what legal language was being used. Bieber's testimony had made one thing clear. This wasn't just about what could be proven in court. It was about what people now believed. That morning, Diddy had walked into the courtroom like a man in charge. Smooth suit, small talk with his lawyers, even a flash of confidence in his smile. But when Bieber started speaking, the cracks began to show. At first, subtle, the slight narrowing of the eyes, the rhythmic tapping of his fingers on the defense table. He leaned forward as if trying to read something between the lines. But those watching closely knew what was really happening. He waved off his lawyer's attempts to speak. His focus was locked on Bieber, but it wasn't the focus of someone listening. It was the stare of someone losing control. The slight hunch of his shoulders, the restless shifting in his seat. Diddy wasn't just hearing testimony. He was watching the walls close in. And for the first time, it seemed like he didn't have a plan to stop it. As Justin Bieber's testimony unfolded, the courtroom transformed from a space of legal procedure into something more electric, more volatile. Observers, reporters, and even court staff began noting what wasn't being said just as much as what was. And all eyes, intentionally or not, kept drifting toward one man, Diddy. From the moment Bieber began detailing those exclusive, whisper-shrouded parties, Diddy's demeanor started to shift. At first, it was subtle, a tight jaw, eyes locked on the floor, one hand pressed firmly against his lips as if physically holding himself back. But it didn't stay subtle for long. With every line Bieber delivered, Diddy's discomfort became more visible. Tension spread across his shoulders like a weighted blanket. His body stiffened with every carefully placed word. And then came the moment that pierced through the controlled image he had so carefully curated over decades. I wasn't the only one, Bieber said, his gaze unwavering as he addressed the jury. Those 5 words shifted the entire tone of the room. Diddy muttered something under his breath. Not loud enough to be clearly heard, but enough that those seated near him turned their heads. His hand moved to his forehead, massaging it slowly and deliberately. One courtroom reporter later called it a silent scream, a physical manifestation of internal collapse. The tapping fingers he'd kept rhythmically moving throughout the morning curled into tight fists. For a brief second, he looked like he might stand and say something, but one of his attorneys gently placed a calming hand on his arm, silently urging him to hold back. It worked, but barely. The prosecution didn't need to say a word. The real evidence at that moment was Diddy's reaction. This wasn't the confident, composed mogul the public had seen for decades. This was someone unraveling, live in front of a jury, in front of cameras, in front of the very people he used to command with ease. The ripple was immediate. Reporters scribbled madly in their notebooks. A few exchanged wide-eyed glances across the benches. Observers in the gallery began whispering, leaning in to catch every moment, every tick of Diddy's reaction. He shifted in his chair, his neck stiff, his eyes flickering between Bieber and the jury. When Bieber described feeling pressure to go along with everything, Diddy's sharp shake of the head cut through the air like a warning shot. It was small but loud. To everyone watching, it screamed frustration, denial, panic, maybe even fear, and it didn't go unnoticed. Courtroom insiders later described the episode as the most revealing moment of the entire trial to date. Not because of what was said, but because of how it landed. Diddy's silence had long been his armor. His mystique had always been built on control. But now, his body language was telling a completely different story. Speculation swirled the moment court adjourned. Reporters filed dispatches framing Bieber's testimony as a game-changer. But it was Diddy's response, his visible unraveling, that stuck with everyone. As he exited the courtroom, his legal team encircled him like a human shield, hustling him past cameras and spectators. Yet the damage wasn't something they could block or distract from. It had already been done. Some legal analysts whispered that the jury didn't just hear Bieber, they felt him. And they saw Diddy. That dynamic, many said, might prove to be far more influential than any piece of evidence yet presented. Because when a man who's built an empire on control loses it in front of the world, it leaves a mark. Public opinion outside the courtroom wasn't any gentler. Conversations echoed themes that had arisen in other high-profile cases. If celebrities knew, why didn't they say anything? Some asked, echoing the moral debates that surrounded the Harvey Weinstein trial. But the truth was messier than that. Rumors are one thing. Concrete knowledge is another. And this trial wasn't likely to answer that question with certainty. Still, Bieber's testimony gave the rumors form. His presence alone lent credibility to whispers long dismissed. And with Diddy's breakdown adding visceral proof that something had struck a nerve, the courtroom had reached a point of no return. Observers left the courthouse that evening changed. They hadn't just seen a celebrity trial. They had witnessed something deeper, a power structure cracking in real time.
Drika, how would you describe Cassie's demeanor when she took the stand today?
When she walked in there, Rachel, she had on a brown dress, form-fitting, visibly pregnant, head held high, and did not make any eye contact with the defendant, with Sean Combs.
Everyone knew he was the devil. He's been the devil for 30 years. He's been covered and protected by not only Clive Davis, but Lucien Grange.
As this high-profile trial unfolds, there's a burning question hovering in the minds of many. If these allegations are true, how could no one have known? It's a fair question, one that legal analysts, journalists, and the public are all grappling with. Because this isn't a case of isolated, behind-closed-doors abuse. This is something that allegedly happened repeatedly over many years and often in public or semi-public spaces. Hotel rooms, parties, events surrounded by others. It's eerily similar to what we saw with Weinstein, Epstein, and other powerful figures whose behavior was an open secret in their respective circles. This isn't just about one man's actions. It's about an entire system that may have looked the other way. And that's exactly what makes this trial, and Justin Bieber's involvement, so significant. Bieber's name entering the courtroom narrative shocked many. Not because of what he said happened to him. On the contrary, his representatives made it clear that he is not a victim of Diddy, but because of what his testimony represents. Bieber wasn't just any celebrity. He had history with Diddy. He had proximity. They were once frequently seen together, shared stages, red carpets, and even headlines. At one point, Diddy gifted Bieber a white Lamborghini, a gesture that made waves at the time and symbolized their apparent closeness. So when Bieber took the stand, it wasn't just about supporting the prosecution. It was about shedding light on a dynamic that many suspected but few could ever prove. He wasn't accusing Diddy of personal harm. He was describing a culture. He was talking about the atmosphere, the power imbalance, the quiet rules everyone seemed to follow, but no one dared speak about. This testimony matters. It gives the jury and the public context. It's one thing to hear accusations in isolation. It's another to hear a high-profile figure describe the unspoken tension at parties, the strange expectations, the way certain people seem to operate above consequence. Bieber's testimony filled in the blanks between the accusations. It offered a thread of continuity that could help the prosecution tie different stories together. And perhaps that's why Diddy's legal team seems so rattled. Because this wasn't just another accuser coming forward. This was someone from the inside, someone with reach and credibility, stepping forward to say, yes, I saw things too. Of course, the rumors have been swirling for weeks, on social media, in online forums, across gossip columns. People have speculated wildly, sometimes irresponsibly. Even Cassie felt the need to clarify false claims, like the one about drug-laced baby oil. And now, even the prosecution's witnesses are pushing back on rumor with testimony. Bieber's team, when approached by journalists, reportedly took their time before issuing a carefully worded statement. They didn't want to make this about him. They didn't want to detract from actual victims. But they also didn't want to stay silent. That distinction is crucial. Bieber isn't centering himself in the narrative. He's anchoring it. His words don't accuse, they reveal. He's not making headlines with sensational claims. He's giving weight to a story that has too often been whispered in shadows. And maybe that's what makes his appearance in court so powerful. This isn't just a trial about Diddy. It's a trial about how far power can stretch before someone finally says, enough. And sometimes it takes someone with a platform, someone like Bieber, to say it loud enough for the world to hear. The moment Justin Bieber took the stand, the entire atmosphere in the courtroom changed dramatically. Observers described it as a sudden and undeniable shift in energy. Diddy, who had previously appeared confident and composed, now looked visibly shaken. His legal team's posture grew tense, betraying a sense of urgency that hadn't been there before. Up to that point, Diddy's camp had held onto an air of control, but Bieber's testimony challenged that facade completely. Some legal analysts even speculated that his words forced the defense to reconsider their entire strategy on the spot, scrambling to adjust to this new reality. Experts weighed in quickly, with one calling Bieber's insider testimony a bombshell that carries undeniable credibility. They posed a crucial question. Could Bieber's courage in stepping forward inspire others who have stayed silent to come forward as well? The possibility was real, and that uncertainty hung heavy in the courtroom air. By choosing to speak, Bieber effectively cracked open the door for potential new witnesses. Those who might have witnessed similar events or endured comparable experiences but feared the consequences of speaking out until now. Bieber's high-profile involvement sends a powerful message. No one, not even a titan like Diddy, is beyond accountability. Should more witnesses emerge to support Bieber's claims, the damage to Diddy's defense could be catastrophic, both legally and in the court of public opinion. For Diddy's legal team, the day was clearly one to forget. Insiders reported that after Bieber's testimony, the defense appeared unsettled, their usual confidence replaced by quiet urgency. They requested a brief recess, presumably to regroup and rethink their approach, an admission of just how disruptive Bieber's words had been. This moment didn't just rattle Diddy emotionally. It forced his entire legal strategy into question. The reputational damage for Diddy is significant. His career, built on influence and a carefully maintained image of untouchable power, now faces a serious threat. Bieber's revelations peeled back the curtain on a side of Diddy that the public had only whispered about but never seen so clearly. Control and mystique, once his greatest assets, are starting to unravel, with the court of public opinion watching every move. This could lead to others in Diddy's circle distancing themselves to protect their own reputations. One thing is certain. Bieber's testimony marked a turning point not only in the trial, but in how Diddy's public image is perceived. Whether or not it is enough to secure a conviction remains to be seen, but its impact is undeniable. The courtroom may have fallen quiet after Bieber stepped down, but the aftershocks of his testimony are still spreading. What unfolds next could define not just Diddy's fate, but also whether others with insider knowledge will feel empowered to break their silence. For years, Diddy's private parties have been the subject of Hollywood gossip, lavish, exclusive events shrouded in secrecy. Access was tightly controlled, limited to an elite group of industry insiders, celebrities, and rising stars who never spoke publicly about what happened behind those closed doors. Rumors painted these gatherings as no-holds-barred affairs where the usual rules didn't apply, and where Diddy's influence was absolute. Bieber's testimony struck at the heart of those rumors. While he didn't expose every detail, his words gave credence to the hushed stories of an environment that made some attendees uncomfortable, especially young stars like him who were just entering the industry. "I've been to those parties," Bieber said, his tone steady but heavy. "Sometimes I didn't feel like I belonged there." That simple statement reignited public curiosity and concern about what really transpired at these legendary but secretive events. Diddy's parties, power, control, and a cracking facade. Over the years, whispers around Diddy's infamous parties hinted at far more than wild, carefree nights. These gatherings weren't merely social events. They were strategic moves in a game of power. They serve as a way to keep influential people close, to forge alliances, and to maintain an unspoken hierarchy within a room. Bieber's testimony painted these events in an even darker light. According to him, these weren't just parties. They were carefully orchestrated environments designed for purposes beyond mere fun. The cultural weight of these parties cannot be overstated. For nearly 2 decades, Diddy's events have stood at the crossroads of Hollywood and the music industry, a place where careers could be launched or quietly shaped behind the scenes. To be invited meant you had arrived, part of a select circle. But for Diddy, this exclusivity was about more than prestige. It was about control. His parties extended his influence, with an unspoken rule of silence hanging over them like a shadow. Now, with Bieber breaking that silence, the veil of secrecy is beginning to unravel. Heavy speculation surrounds what Bieber might have witnessed during those nights. His testimony left no doubt that some experiences were impactful enough to compel him to speak out years later. At one striking moment, Bieber stated, "You didn't ask questions and you didn't say no." Those words struck deeply, especially considering his youth at the time. It raises urgent questions about the pressures he, and likely others, faced within Diddy's exclusive world. Could these parties have been venues where boundaries were blurred and appearances carefully maintained to mask something far more sinister? Bieber's implications, though subtle, were impossible to overlook. For Diddy's reputation, this is a devastating blow. The allure of these events, what made them legendary, was precisely their exclusivity and the powerful image they projected. They portrayed Diddy as a tastemaker and cultural icon who effortlessly blended celebrity with influence. But Bieber's revelations flipped this narrative on its head. Instead of celebrations of success, these parties now sound like meticulously controlled spaces with hidden, possibly harmful motives. Someone who spent years crafting a public persona based on power and mystique now faces the risk of seeing that carefully constructed image come undone. The most troubling aspect? With Bieber breaking the silence, it's unclear how many others might feel emboldened to come forward. If more witnesses share similar stories, the ripple effect could be enormous. Bieber's words carry enormous weight, not just because of his celebrity, but because they expose cracks in the broader perception of power in the entertainment world. Diddy's camp, already shaken by the trial's dramatic developments, now confronts the threat of further revelations from those who have remained silent for years. Regardless of the trial's outcome, this surge of attention on Diddy's parties shifts the narrative from his musical and business legacy to a far more troubling story, one he is unlikely to control. The precise details Bieber disclosed about those gatherings remain confidential, but even the smallest hint has ignited a firestorm of public opinion. Diddy's empire was built on control of his career, his relationships, and most importantly, his image. Bieber's testimony represents a significant crack in that foundation, one Diddy hopes remains unexploited. This trial has swiftly evolved from a legal battle into a cultural reckoning, with repercussions that extend beyond just one man. What happens next is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the silence around Diddy's parties cannot last forever. Bieber's testimony could mark the beginning of the end for Diddy. Each explosive revelation peels back layers of the image Diddy carefully curated for decades. Once viewed as a protege, Bieber has become a critical voice in a story no one expected him to tell. The Courtroom drama shows no sign of slowing, and the questions about Diddy's past are only growing louder. What's your take? Do you believe Bieber's decision to testify will change everything?